and welcome to our 53rd episode of Tuesday Tales of Terror. Now, mid-August, and we are more than halfway through the summer, more than halfway through the year, which is crazy, and we are now entering part 3 of The Man Who Was Poe. We've arrived. Excellent. So we're going to start chapter 4. And oh, that's right. There was a note slipped under the door. Okay, let's go. Chapter 4. Meddle at your peril. Drink some water, settle in, let's get spooky. Tonight we're back to the Panda Cup. If you've been paying attention, it's my personal favorite. So, here we are. Thirst, a raw throat, and a throbbing head woke Dupin in the morning. Painfully, he sat up and examined the dreary room. When his gaze fell on Edmund, still asleep on the bed, he had no idea who the boy was. Bit by bit, Dupin reconstructed the previous night's events, including his half-promise to find the boy's sister. Swearing under his breath, he berated himself for even considering the business. There were more important things to attend to: his courtship of Mrs. Whitman, the need to raise money for his new journal, the desire to write about... Vaguely, he recalled his notion that what was happening to the boy could be a story. He had even made notes. He grabbed for his carpet bag, relieved to find it by his feet. Then, finding his notebook, he turned the pages and read what he had written. It made his head ache. Feeling panicky, he rummaged through his carpet bag, but found all his bottles empty. His headache intensified. His mouth felt as if it were full of sand. He looked about again. This time he noticed the half-meat pie partially wrapped in newspaper. With a voracious appetite, he reached for it. Voracious. As Dupin ate, he poked idly at the scrap of paper. It was the first page of the Providence Journal, and contained a column of personal notices from 2 weeks before. With a mind given to the automatic habit of reading, he casually examined it. And these are, of course, the newspaper notices. Notice extraordinary. As this is the season when Gaiman oyster suppers are in great demand, particularly so as the presidential election is shortly to be decided, we would recommend those who have suppers depending to make arrangements with Frank Foster in season that he may be able to accommodate all. Notice: Mr. William Arnold is resident in the Hotel American House on Congdon Street and is ready to conduct business with interested parties. Principals only. Position wanted. The advertiser, R. Peterson, a good copyist and accountant, thoroughly discreet, being at leisure from 6 to 9 p.m., would like any remunerative employment 3 or 4 evenings a week. Apply at Providence Bank, office for particulars. Bored, Dupin pushed the paper aside. Then stiffly, for the damp, cold air had chilled him, he drew his greatcoat over his shoulders, opened the door to the room, and looked out. The foul-smelling, deserted hallway filled him with self-loathing. He made up his mind. He would leave, attend to his own affairs, find something else to write about. But as Dupin stepped back into the room to fetch his carpet bag, he caught sight of a piece of paper on the floor. He picked it up. It read, "Meddle at your peril." Dupin reread the note. He was being challenged, insulted. He looked at the still sleeping boy. Perhaps, he told himself, there was more here than the squalor of the place suggested. Dupin stuffed the note into a pocket and looked about with new interest. But the room was so small, so barren, that his energy quickly flagged. He would go. He snatched his carpet bag and was turning toward the door when Edmund woke. "Mr. Dupin?" the boy asked. "Did my sister come back?" Dupin, embarrassed to have been caught. "What Why are you falling over at this moment? Embarrassed to have been caught sneaking away, shook his head. He leaned against the window casement and stared out, wondering if Edmund had been feigning sleep and watching him. Mr. Dupin, Edmund said, when I came back last night, you were asleep. No doubt. I ate only half the pie. The larger half. Edmund blushed. Sir? What? Will you still help me? Dupin gazed sullenly out the window, wishing to avoid Edmund's watchful look. Should he or should he not help the boy? Was there or was there not a story here? If there was, he needed more information. I have, Dupin said at last, an appointment of great importance this afternoon. Until then I shall spend my time in search of your sister. Thank you, sir. But let me impress one thing upon you. Edmund, if I remember your name, Dupin continued, it is you who have the knowledge that will enable me to solve this affair. I do, but though you have these details, only I have the ability to understand them. Therefore, I will need to ask you some questions. Yes, sir. Dupin pulled pen and ink bottle from the carpet bag, opened his notebook, settled at the table, and with pen poised, said, how long have you, your aunt, your sister, yourself, lived in this place? Sir? Dupin looked up. Is it necessary for you to write out what I say? Dupin stared hard at Edmund. Do you or do you not wish my help? He asked. I do, sir, Edmund answered faintly. Then answer my questions. How long have you been living here? About a month. And you're from England? London, sir. What brought you here? Edmund said nothing. Did you hear my question? I did, sir. Then answer it. Edmund took a breath. Finally he said, a while ago, my mum went away and left us with Auntie. That's my mum's sister. Edmund swallowed hard, then continued. Auntie told us that we were to come to America, he lifted his eyes, to try and find Mum. When did your mother leave? A year ago. And why? Casting his eyes down, Edmund said, I don't know, sir. Do you expect me to believe you? Edmund hung his head. Dupin said, I'll try another way. What made your aunt think your mother was here? She received a message. A message? Edmund nodded. From whom? My mother. Who brought it? A sailor. A friend, a relation? Auntie said he was a stranger, and the message said, I don't know, Edmund whispered. Dupin sighed. Edmund, you told me your aunt spent her days out. I presume she was looking for your mother. Did she ever say she'd found her? She would have told us. Were you planning to go back to England? Only when we found Mum. Dupin pointed his pen at the trunk. What's in there? My auntie's things. Have you seen inside? There's only clothing and some family pictures. Do you have a key? Edmund shook his head. Just Auntie. Your sister, how old was she? Not was, sir. Is. She's alive. I know it. Perhaps. How old? 11. Same as you? She's my twin. Twin? It runs in the family. Is there anything else that you wish to tell me? Edmund turned away. No, sir, he said. Dupin put down his pen. Edmund, he said, you must trust me. I do, sir. Then tell me something I can use. Edmund blushed. Trying to find a way to be helpful, he said, Sir, a few days ago, before my auntie disappeared, she said she was going to meet a man who might help her. Did she say who? No. Oh, why was she to meet him? Sister and I believed it had something to do with finding her mum. You recall nothing more than that? She was nervous about it. With reason. Last night, Dupin continued, You told me that when you left your sister in search of food, you locked the door to this room. Are you absolutely certain you did lock it?" "I'm sure, sir." "How many keys are there?" "Two, sir." Edmund took the key from his pocket and offered it. "When Auntie would go, she'd leave me one with us in case we had to go to the loo." "The loo?" "Privy. It's behind the building." Dupin took the key. "Edmund, I shall step into the hall, unlock the door, just as you said you did. When I do, you will attempt to open it from the inside. Is that understood?" "Why?" "Edmund," Dupin cried, "do you have anyone else to help you?" "No, sir." "Then cease your questions and do as I tell you." Edmund bit his lip. "Yes, sir," he said. From the hallway, Dupin locked the door. "Now," he called in, "try to open it." "I can't, sir. It won't give." Dupin unlocked the door, entered the room, strode over to the window and lifted the sash. Damp, cold air rushed in. Leaning out as far as he could, he all but touched the window on the building across the way. Abruptly, he gathered his greatcoat and called, "Come along." Edmund sprang up and followed. On the street, the fog from the bay made it hard to see more than a few yards. Even so, Dupin studied Edmund's building intently, then examined the one to its left. "Notice," Dupin lectured, "how alike the two buildings are, how the windows on the first level match exactly. It will be the same above. Edmund, do you know which is your room?" "The one in the back, on this side. But, sir, I don't follow you." "You claimed you locked your sister in your room." "I did lock the door. I'm sure I did." "Unless someone else had a key, there is only one other way out. Through the window of your room, to the window in the building opposite." "What?" "Edmund, think. How else? Where else?" It took a moment for Dupin's words to sink in, but the moment they did, Edmund leaped forward toward the building, found the steps, and raced up to the 4th floor. There they looked down a long hallway lined with doors, the same as in Edmund's building. "Which would be your room?" Dupin asked. "That one," Edmund said, pointing to the last door on the left. "Good," Dupin said, "but we want the one on the right." Edmund raced down the hall and banged on the door. No one came. He pounded again. "Here," Dupin said, "let me try." And he flung himself forward, shoulder against the door. It burst open. Chapter 5. An Old Man with White Hair. "Nothing's here," Edmund cried. Dupin surveyed the empty room. "Not quite. Look." He pointed to a wooden plank leaning against the wall near the window through which, just across the way, they could see Edmund's room. "Aha!" "Open the window," Dupin ordered. Edmund did as he was told. Dupin lifted the plank and maneuvered it so it reached from one window to the other. It made a perfect walkway. I have crawled across a plank multiple stories in the air in an abandoned building. It was terrifying and exhilarating. "There," Dupin said. "Your sister walked from room to room." Edmund turned to Dupin with astonishment. "But why?" Instead of answering, Dupin bent over and began to examine the floor. Suddenly he stood up, quelling a headache with a hand to his forehead. "Edmund, search the floor. See if you can find anything. I need more proof." "Proof of what?" "Must you question everything?" Dupin cried. "Just search." As Dupin watched, Edmund looked about the floor. Sure enough, in moments he found a pearl button. He snatched it up and brought it to Dupin. "It's from one of my sister's shoes," he explained excitedly. "She's very fond of the shoes. Thinks of them very ladylike." I also love pearls. "Any notion as to why she might have left it?" "Hansel and Gretel," Edmund said promptly. Dupin looked puzzled. "Ooh, don't you dare." Cooked you. Oh my goodness. Perfect. Don't move. Blah, 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 blah. "Hansel and Gretel," Edmund said promptly. Dupin looked puzzled. "It's a fairy tale Sis loves to read," Edmund explained. "About a girl who leaves a trail of crumbs to get back home to her father." "Then you see," Dupin said, "I was right. She was here." "Sir, I still don't think Sis would have come over." "Not on her own, of course not. She was forced." "Do you mean stolen?" Edmund asked, wide-eyed. "Precisely." "But who would do such a thing?" "Find the one who did it," Dupin returned, "and we've gone a long way towards solving this mystery. But quickly now." Before Edmund could absorb what he'd been told, Dupin rushed out of the room. Edmund hurried to keep up with him. At the main entrance of the house, Dupin yanked hard on the doorbell ringer. In moments, a thin, elderly woman, her gray hair wrapped high in turban fashion, came to the door. Though she was standing directly in front of Dupin, she looked this way and that as if she were blind.
"What is it?"
she demanded. "The landlord, if you please," Dupin said.
"Was it a room you'll be wanting?"
the woman asked. "Not at all," Dupin said. "I am a city officer, and I wish to make an inquiry." Edmund, surprised by this declaration, looked up at Dupin.
"We have no troubles here,"
the woman said. Making an effort to shut the door, Dupin thrust his foot against it.
"Here," the woman objected. "I'm an old woman that sees but poorly. I've got my rights."
"We merely wish the name of one of your tenants," Dupin said briskly, as he insinuated himself past the edge of the door. "Fourth floor, back room, right-hand side."
"That's none of," the woman began to say, but she stopped. "That man owes me a week's rent," she exclaimed.
"Exactly. Tell me about him," Dupin said.
"He came here about 2 weeks ago," the woman went on, now quite willing to talk. "Offered to take the room, and mind, very particular which room. But then, you know, he never lived in it. Just came now and again to pace it out with another man. Said he was having trouble getting his goods removed. I didn't care, not as long as he paid. But then he only gave for the first week."
"His name, madam?"
"He wouldn't give it at first, but when I insisted, he said it was Mr. Smith."
"And the way he looked?"
The woman shook her head. "A large man. I've not the eyes to tell you more. What are you asking for?"
"A private matter," Dupin said. "Can you tell us anything else about him? It's urgent."
"Urgent?" the woman echoed. "He owes me money. That's urgent."
Dupin let her shut the door. Edmund tugged at Dupin's coat.
"Sir," he said, "are you really an official?"
"Of course not. Is there a place nearby where we can get something to eat?" Edmund nodded. "Does it sell drink?"
"Yes, sir."
"Find it, Edmund. Find it." It was a large, well-lit cafe, crowded and noisy, that Edmund led them to. Dupin quickly took a table and told the boy to sit. "First," he said, "we shall eat. Then I intend to get you some warmer clothing." He turned to study the chalkboard menu. As he did, Edmund fell into thoughts about what Mr. Dupin had said, that his sister had been stolen. The notion astounded him, terrified him. His own sister. He looked up. Mr. Dupin was staring across the room. Edmund followed his gaze. Mr. Throck, the night watchman, had just entered, and a crowd was gathered about him, listening as he talked with animation. Edmund turned back to Dupin.
"Sir."
Dupin's eyes remained on Throck.
"Mr. Dupin,"
Edmund tried again in a whisper,
"was the person who murdered my aunt the one who stole my sister?"
"What makes you sure your aunt was murdered?" replied Dupin, his eyes still on Throck. "It might have been an accident."
"I'm not certain," Edmund admitted, "but—"
"Then wait for the facts. Now, I wish to ask you something. Were you and your sister together all the time until that moment you left her to go for food? Think hard now. It's important."
"I never left her. I wouldn't. And I only did because... Edmund, I'm not interested in your reasons. The point being, it's logical to suppose that if you are telling the truth, Mr. Dupin..."
Dupin waved Edmund's objection aside and rushed on. Then the man who occupied the room opposite yours was waiting, watching for the moment when you did leave her alone.
Watching us?
Edmund said, startled. Didn't you say that when you went out for food that night you were detained on the street?
An old man asked for some help.
Not just any old man, Edmund, but could it have been an old man with white hair? Edmund's mouth dropped open.
How did you know?
He said. Edmund, that ghastly woman stated that the large man who rented that room had another with him, did she not? Edmund nodded. Therefore, Dupin said triumphantly, we are looking for 2 men. While you were out in search of food and detained, Mr. Smith, that name is, I assure you, a false one, stole your sister. Furthermore, the appointment your aunt had, from which she did not return, was with one of those 2. It was a conspiracy to lure your aunt away, so you would be alone with your sister. Then once you left her,
Sis told me to go.
They detained you, Dupin rushed on, paying no mind to Edmund, and stole her through the window so as to make certain they would not be observed. Who are these people? You said your aunt came to Providence after receiving a message from your mother. A message, Edmund, not a letter. This was brought, moreover, by an ordinary sailor, a most casual means of communication. It suggests your mother acted under duress, on the impulse of sudden opportunity. In short, Edmund, the people your mother was consorting with, the man your aunt went to meet, and perhaps who killed her, the ones who stole your sister, they are all one and the same.
Do you know who they are?
Edmund said, awed by all that Dupin had deduced. I have a good idea. Dupin glanced quickly at Throck. Before Edmund could ask more, a waiter approached.
Your order, sir?
Dupin checked what money he had, then requested soup and bread for Edmund, drink for himself. But as the waiter turned to leave, Dupin called back, That man over there, he said. Is that Mr. Throck? The waiter looked over his shoulder.
It is, sir. He's got himself a ripe story to tell.
A murder? The waiter shook his head.
Sure now, sir. Haven't you heard about the bank?
What bank?
The Providence Bank. It was robbed last night, California gold. Taken right from the vault, like magic. You ask Throck, he'll tell it to you fine.
The waiter scurried off. For a moment, Dupin continued to gaze at Throck. Then he took a small notebook from his pocket and began to write in it.
Sir, Edmund said, if you aren't an official, shouldn't we inform the authorities that my sister was stolen? You might tell them all you've discovered, mightn't you?
Dupin kept writing. Not sure he had been heard, Edmund leaned across the table and touched Dupin's arm. Dupin jumped as though pinched. What do you want? He snapped.
It's about my sister.
What about her?
Shouldn't we inform the authorities?
Edmund, I shall say this but once more. If you desire someone else to help you, find him and leave me in peace. So, make up your mind. Is it to be me? Yes or no? Edmund sat frozen. There, Dupin continued with a nod of his head, is a member of the Providence Night Watch, Mr. Throck. He would be delighted to lend assistance, but I can assure you, Edmund, he will be of very little use. Now again, do you or do you not wish to learn what happened to your sister?
I do, sir.
Then believe me, only Auguste Dupin can help you. He smiled faintly. I may have discovered how she was stolen, but I do not yet know why, much less her present condition. I'll act only when I have completed my investigations.
But...
No buts. Now, Dupin continued without pause. As soon as we're done here, I have an errand for you to run. In the meanwhile, do you know a clothier in the neighborhood?
A clothier? I think so, Edmund said, trying to keep up with Mr. Dupin's constant shifts.
Good, Dupin said. No more idle chatter. Here's your soup. Eat it. You're in need. Afraid to say anything, Edmund turned to the food the waiter had set before him. Mr. Dupin, he noticed, had put the notebook away and was sipping from his glass, but mostly he was keeping an eye on the night watchman. Edmund realized that the man was returning Dupin's stare. "The clothier you spoke of," Dupin said abruptly. "Is it far?" Edmund shook his head. "Good," Dupin said. "Go and determine the price of a coat for yourself. Can you do that?"
"Now?"
Edmund said. He had not finished eating. Dupin checked his pocket watch. "It's 9:30. Return in half an hour. Not a moment sooner. Go on, quickly now." Edmund rose from the table, bread in hand, and glanced across the room. The night watchman had come to his feet, too. "Are you, or are you not, going to do as you've been told?" Dupin pressed.
"Yes, sir, I will."
Edmund left the cafe reluctantly. Even as he did, Throck crossed the room and approached Dupin. Things are about to get juicy. Huh. Well, we're just going to have to find out what happens next week, because that's the end of chapter 5, and we are concluding part 3 there. I could read on, but no, I'm not going to. Wonderful. Well, that was lovely. Have a magical week, and I will see you next Tuesday. Ciao. Stay spooky.